I sat cross-legged on the floor of my dimly lit apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's life. A box, slightly worn and weathered with age, lay open in front of me, revealing a treasure trove of memories. I could hardly believe I had forgotten about this box, tucked away in the back of my closet for what felt like years. The scent of old paper and faint lavender lingered in the air, a comforting reminder of my mother's presence, even in her absence. As I sifted through the contents, I found a collection of photographs, each one a snapshot of a moment I had long since buried. There she was, my mother, radiant and vibrant, posing in front of her favorite gallery, her dark curls cascading down her shoulders. The soft light of the gallery illuminated her face, and I could almost hear her laughter echoing in my ears. "God, Mom," I murmured, a bittersweet smile creeping onto my lips. "You were so beautiful." I carefully picked up the photo, tracing my finger over her face. She had always believed that art was a powerful way to connect with the world, a belief she had instilled in me from a young age. Yet, it was also a passion that had led her into a web of secrets and shadows. I shook my head, trying to dispel the heaviness that settled over me. "Just memories," I whispered to myself, as if saying it out loud could make the pain less sharp. I placed the photo aside and rummaged through the rest of the box, finding old tickets to art exhibitions, crumpled letters, and even a small sketch she had made of me when I was a child. Each item pulled me deeper into a past I had tried to forget. After a while, I decided I needed a break. The weight of nostalgia was becoming overwhelming, and I felt the familiar itch for caffeine. I stood up, stretching my legs, and glanced out of the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden hue over the bustling street below. I grabbed my jacket and slipped on my shoes, ready to escape the confines of my memories, if only for a little while. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapped around me like a refreshing embrace. I made my way down the street, the sound of my footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. The city was alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. There was a little cafe around the corner that served the best coffee in the neighborhood, and I could almost taste the rich brew on my tongue. As I turned the corner, I spotted a figure across the street. A man stood there, leaning casually against a lamppost, his gaze fixed intently on me. His eyes were piercing, a deep shade of blue that seemed to penetrate right through me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, an unsettling mix of discomfort and intrigue. Why is he staring at me? I thought, my heart beginning to race. I quickened my pace, avoiding his gaze as I crossed the street. I could feel his eyes on me, a weighty presence that made it hard to breathe. "Get a grip, Sarah," I chided myself. He's probably just waiting for someone. But as I stepped into the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The barista greeted me with a smile, and I ordered my usual, a steaming cup of dark roast. I took a seat by the window, trying to distract myself with my phone, but my mind kept drifting back to the man. What was it about him that made me so uneasy? I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through me, but my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a piece of paper fluttering against the door. I glanced over, and my heart dropped. There it was, a singular sheet of paper, bold and out of place against the glass. My curiosity piqued. I got up and approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I carefully picked it up and unfolded it. The message was scrawled in uneven handwriting, the words striking me like a slap to the face. "You are closer than you think. What the hell?" I said aloud, my voice barely a whisper. I glanced around the cafe, half expecting someone to jump out from behind the counter and explain this bizarre note. But everyone was engrossed in their own conversations, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. My mind raced as I crumpled the note in my hand. Who had left this? Was it a prank? Or was it something more sinister? I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I needed answers, but I didn't even know where to start. I returned to my seat, my coffee now forgotten. The man from across the street flashed through my mind again. There was something about him that felt off. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. As I finished my coffee, I glanced out the window one last time, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he was gone. The street was now bustling with people, and I felt a pang of disappointment mixed with relief. I could hardly breathe as I made my way back home, my mind racing with questions. Once inside my apartment, I tossed the crumpled note onto the coffee table and sank onto the couch. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I had always been one to shy away from confrontation, preferring the safety of my own world. But this felt different. It felt personal. "What do you want from me?" I muttered to the empty room. The silence was deafening, and I felt a sense of isolation creeping in. I glanced at the box of memories still open on the floor, and suddenly I was struck by a thought. Maybe this was all connected to my mother. I had spent the last few years trying to piece together the fragments of her life, but they were often shrouded in mystery. Perhaps this was a sign, a nudge from the universe to dig deeper. I stood up, determination flooding my veins. I needed to find out who the man was, what the note meant, and how it all tied back to the life my mother had led. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched for anything relating to my mother and the gallery where she used to exhibit her art. Maybe someone there had seen something, or maybe they could help me understand the connections that seemed to elude me. As I delved into the depths of the internet, my heart raced with anticipation. I felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle, the thrill of the chase igniting a fire within me that I hadn't felt in years. I knew that this journey would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, not just for myself, but for my mother, who had fought her own battles in silence. And just like that, the mundane evening transformed into something exhilarating. I was on the brink of uncovering secrets that had been buried for far too long. I wouldn't back down. I would find the truth, no matter how deep I had to dig. The note, the man, the gallery. It was all connected, and I was determined to unravel the mystery that had haunted my family for years. As the sunlight filtered through the blinds of my small apartment, I found myself sifting through an old box of memories that belonged to my mother. It was a task I had postponed for far too long, but today, in the quiet of my space, I felt compelled to revisit the fragments of her life that I had stored away. Dust danced in the air, illuminated by the golden rays, as I pulled out items one by one. Old tickets, faded letters, and photographs that captured moments frozen in time. Then, I stumbled upon a photograph that made my heart race. It was a picture of my mother standing proudly beside her artwork in a gallery. Her smile was radiant, and the vibrant colors of the paintings behind her seemed to leap off the page. I could almost hear her laughter echoing in the room. The date on the back read, Chicago Art Gala, 1995. I couldn't help but wonder about the stories behind that moment, the connections she had forged, and the passion that drove her to create. With the photo in hand, I felt a surge of determination. I would find out more about her time in the art world, especially the gallery where she had once exhibited. But first, I needed coffee. As I stepped outside, the bustling streets of Chicago greeted me with their usual chaos. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of honking cars and distant laughter. I was lost in thought, my mind racing with questions about my mother's past, when I suddenly felt a prickle at the back of my neck. I turned my head slightly and caught sight of a man standing across the street. He was tall, with dark hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. There was something unsettling yet compelling about his gaze. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and I quickly looked away, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort that wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I hurried to the cafe, clutching my phone tightly, as if it could shield me from whatever unease was creeping in. I ordered a cappuccino, and while I waited, I couldn't help but steal glances out the window, searching for the man. He was gone, lost among the crowd, but the memory of his gaze lingered. After grabbing my coffee, I returned home, my thoughts still racing. As I approached my apartment door, something caught my eye, a piece of paper lying just in front of it. I bent down to pick it up, the chill of dread settling in my stomach the moment I saw the words scrawled across it. "You are closer than you think." My heart raced as I read and reread the message. Who had left this? Was it a warning? A threat? The man from across the street flashed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow connected. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I needed answers. The gallery where my mother had displayed her work felt like the first step toward uncovering the truth. I grabbed my jacket and headed out again, determination fueling my every step. The gallery was located in a vibrant part of town, a place where art breathed life into the streets. As I entered, the familiar scent of paint and varnish enveloped me. I glanced around, taking in the colorful canvases that adorned the walls. Each piece seemed to have its own story, much like my mother. I approached the front desk, where an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed beard was flipping through a stack of papers. His name tag read, Mr. Hargrove. I cleared my throat, trying to muster the courage to speak. "Excuse me," I said, my voice slightly shaky. "I'm looking for information about my mother, Sarah Mitchell. She exhibited here several years ago." Mr. Hargrove looked up, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to something more guarded. "Sarah Mitchell, you say?" "Yes, I remember her. A talented artist." He hesitated, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "But that time has passed. Things have changed in the art community since then." "Changed how?" I pressed, sensing his reluctance. Was there something that happened? Something that involved her? He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. The art world can be a dark place, filled with secrets and rivalries. Your mother was involved in something that put her in a precarious position." "Precarious?" I echoed, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I can't discuss it here," he whispered, leaning closer. "You should come back another time, perhaps when it's quieter. Just be careful. Some things are better left buried." I nodded, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I knew I had to dig deeper, but how? The gallery was a dead end for now, and I felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on me. Returning home, I felt a mix of determination and dread. I needed to piece together the fragments of my mother's life, and I had to start with the old documents I had kept over the years. I dug through my drawers, pulling out boxes filled with papers, letters, and legal documents that had accumulated over time. After what felt like hours of searching, I finally found a folder marked Estate of Sarah Mitchell. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a collection of documents related to her art and a few mention of her legal affairs. As I sifted through, one particular document caught my eye, a police report that detailed the circumstances surrounding her death. I scanned the text, my heart pounding louder with each line. There, buried among the details, was a reference to a witness, my mother. I felt a chill run through me as the implications sank in. She had seen something worth killing for. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sensation crept over me like a shadow, and I glanced out the window, half expecting to see the man from across the street. But the street below was just as busy as before, with people passing by, unaware of the storm brewing within me. I needed to talk to someone who knew her, someone who could shed light on the darkness surrounding her past. I picked up my phone, scrolling through contacts, but hesitated. Who could I trust? Would anyone be willing to help me uncover the truth? Suddenly, a notification pinged on my phone, breaking the silence. I opened it and my blood ran cold. It was another message from the mysterious man. "You're digging too deep. Stop now or you'll regret it." My heart raced as panic set in. I felt trapped, like a rat in a cage. But there was no way I could stop now. I had to know what happened to my mother, even if it meant facing whatever dangers lay ahead. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. With each piece of information I uncovered, I felt myself getting closer to a truth that had been hidden for far too long. The investigation had begun, and there was no turning back now. Sitting on the floor of my small apartment, I rummaged through the old box of memories my mother had left behind. The familiar scent of aged paper and forgotten dreams wafted up, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I pulled out a faded photograph, my mother standing proudly next to one of her paintings at a gallery opening. Her smile radiated joy, a stark contrast to the shadows that seemed to loom over our lives now. I traced her features with my fingers, feeling a pang of longing mixed with the bitter taste of unresolved questions. What secrets had she taken with her? I put the photo aside, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. It was time to step back into the world she had once thrived in, the world I had left behind after her tragic death. I had to know more about her life, the art, and the people who surrounded her. I grabbed my coat and headed out to get some coffee, hoping the caffeine would soothe the swirling thoughts in my mind. As I stepped onto the bustling street, the cool breeze hit my face, snapping me out of my reverie. I crossed the road, my gaze drifting over the crowd when suddenly, I caught sight of him. A man stood across the street, his piercing eyes locked onto me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something unsettling yet magnetic about his gaze. My heart raced, and I quickly averted my eyes, trying to shake off the discomfort. Was he watching me? I hurried to the cafe, the feeling of being observed lingering in the back of my mind like an unwanted shadow. After grabbing my coffee, I returned home, the chill of the encounter still clinging to me. As I approached my apartment door, something caught my eye. A folded piece of paper lay on the ground, conspicuously placed as if it had been waiting for me. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly as I unfolded it. The words stared back at me, chilling and cryptic. "You are closer than you think." My breath caught in my throat. Who had left this? And what did it mean? The message sent a wave of adrenaline surging through me. I needed to make sense of this. Perhaps it was connected to the man I had seen earlier. I could no longer ignore the nagging feeling that something deeper was at play. I had to investigate. The next day, I made my way to the art gallery where my mother had showcased her work. As I entered, the familiar scent of paint and varnish enveloped me, stirring memories of childhood visits and the pride I felt watching her paint. The gallery owner, a stout man with a thick mustache, recognized me immediately. "Sarah, it's been a long time," he said, his voice warm yet tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "How have you been?" "I'm okay, Mr. Collins. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about my mother," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual despite the weight of my intentions. His expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Your mother, she was a talented woman, but it's been years since, well, the world of art has changed a lot since then." "Yes, I understand," I pressed on, trying to read his reaction. "But I found something recently, and I need to know more about what happened to her." Mr. Collins hesitated, glancing around as if to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "There are things better left in the past, Sarah. Sometimes the truth can be more harmful than ignorance." His reluctance only fueled my determination. "I need to know, please. Anything you can tell me," I insisted. He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as if the memories were weighing him down. "All right, but be careful. Your mother was involved in something complicated. There were powerful people who didn't take kindly to her questions." "Questions about what?" pressed. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "There was a crime, something that ran deep within the art community. Your mother stumbled upon it, and she was not the only one. The time brought many changes, but some things never really go away." I left the gallery feeling a mix of confusion and determination. The encounter had only raised more questions. What had my mother uncovered? And who were these powerful people he mentioned? I returned home, my mind racing. I dug through old documents, letters, and newspaper clippings I had gathered over the years, trying to piece together the fragments of a past I barely understood. As I sifted through the papers, one name kept appearing. A witness to my mother's case who had vanished without a trace. My heart raced. Could this be my way in? I needed to connect with anyone who had known her. I grabbed my phone and began to reach out to acquaintances, artists, and friends from her past, hoping someone would remember something useful. But before I could make a significant connection, my phone buzzed, breaking my concentration. I opened a new message and felt my blood run cold. "Stop looking into this, Sarah. You have no idea what you're playing with." The message was from an unknown number, but the tone was unmistakably menacing. My hands shook slightly as I read the words over and over, each time feeling a deeper sense of dread. I shook my head, trying to clear the panic creeping in. I couldn't back down now. I needed to keep pushing forward, even with this new threat looming over me. I decided to meet up with Daniel, a friend I had known since college. He had always been interested in investigative work and might offer some insight. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where the noise of the world outside faded into a comforting hum. Daniel was already seated, his brow furrowed as he scanned the menu. When he saw me, his face broke into a smile, but it quickly faded when he noticed my expression. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "I've been getting some strange messages," I confessed, sliding into the seat across from him. "And I'm trying to dig into my mother's past. I think she was involved in something dangerous." Daniel leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean? What did she get into?" I recounted the details of my findings, the gallery, Mr. Collins' cryptic warnings, and the threatening message I had received. "I think it's all connected. I need your help to investigate further," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Of course, I'll help you," he replied, his expression turning serious. "But you have to be careful. If someone is watching you, we can't afford to make any mistakes." His willingness to assist was reassuring, but a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Could I trust him completely? We had shared many moments in the past, but this was different. I needed to protect myself, especially with the threats emerging from the shadows. As we discussed the next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every glance around the cafe felt charged with tension. I excused myself to the restroom, taking a moment to breathe and gather my thoughts. As I splashed cold water on my face, I stared at my reflection, searching for the strength to confront whatever lay ahead. Returning to the table, I checked my phone again, hoping for some sign that I wasn't alone in this. But instead, I found another message, this one even more chilling than the last. It contained a photo of my mother, taken at the gallery, the same one I had discovered in the box. The caption read, "You need to stop this. You are in over your head." My heart raced, panic setting in. I shoved the phone into my pocket, fighting to keep my composure. "Daniel, I just got another message," I said, my voice shaky. "What does it say?" he asked, his eyes narrowing in concern. I hesitated, weighing my options. Should I tell him everything? Would it put him in danger? But I knew I needed his help. "It's someone warning me to stop looking into my mother's death. They know I'm investigating." He leaned back, his expression turning grave. "This is serious, Sarah. We need to be extra cautious. If they're watching you, they might not hesitate to do something." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle heavily on my shoulders. I had stepped into a world filled with shadows and secrets, and now there was no turning back. The only way forward was to unravel the truth, no matter how dangerous it may be. As I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, surrounded by a sea of dust and memories, I felt a wave of nostalgia hit me like a freight train. The box was old, its edges frayed and the lid barely hanging on. Inside, I discovered remnants of a life that seemed both distant and achingly familiar. There were photographs, letters, and trinkets that told stories of my mother's life, her laughter, her struggles, and, most importantly, her art. One photo caught my eye. It was a candid shot of my mother standing in front of a large canvas in a bright, airy gallery. She looked radiant, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, a smile that lit up her face. The backdrop was filled with vibrant works of art, each piece more stunning than the last. I could almost hear her voice in my mind, talking passionately about her creations. I couldn't help but wonder about the world that existed beyond that photograph. What had happened to her art? To her dreams? My heart raced as I put the photo aside, my mind swirling with questions. I needed coffee. I stepped outside, the cool breeze mingling with the warmth of the sun. The streets were bustling as usual, but something felt different today. As I walked towards my favorite cafe, I glanced across the street and caught sight of a man, strikingly handsome, with sharp features and piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. He stood there, watching me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, feeling an unsettling mix of discomfort and intrigue. Who was he? Why was he staring at me? I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination. After all, I was still processing the discovery of my mother's photograph, a piece of my past that had suddenly resurfaced. When I returned home, a chill ran through me. A single piece of paper lay on my doorstep, stark against the muted colors of the world around me. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly as I unfolded it. The message was simple yet haunting. You are closer than you think. My heart raced as adrenaline coursed through my veins. Who had left this? What did it mean? My mind raced with possibilities, and before I knew it, I was pacing the room, the weight of the message settling heavily on my shoulders. I needed to know more. I needed answers. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the very gallery where my mother's photo had been taken. The building loomed over me, its glass doors reflecting the sunlight, inviting yet foreboding. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the familiar smell of paint and varnish enveloping me. "Sarah, it's been a while," greeted the gallery owner, a jovial man named Thomas, who had known my mother well. His face lit up with recognition. "Hi, Thomas," I replied, forcing a smile. "I was hoping to ask you a few questions about my mother." His demeanor shifted slightly, and I noticed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Of course, but you know how it is. Time changes things. Please, it's important," I pressed, my heart pounding. "I found a photo of her here, and I received a strange message." He glanced around, as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "Your mother was involved in a lot more than just art. There were whispers, things that happened." "Whispers? What kind of things?" I asked, leaning closer. "Look, Sarah, I don't want to get involved in this," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "There are powerful people connected to your mother's life. Figures in this city you don't want to mess with." I felt a mix of frustration and determination. "I have to know the truth. Please, anything you can tell me." He sighed heavily, looking away. "Your mother had some powerful enemies. She was close to uncovering something big before she died. I can't say more." I left the gallery feeling unsettled, a storm of emotions swirling within me. Back at my apartment, I rifled through old documents my mother had left behind, hoping to find something, anything, that would shed light on her past. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon references to an unsolved murder, along with a name that sent a jolt through me. My mother had been a witness. My heart raced as I pieced together the fragments of this puzzle. What had my mother witnessed? Who had she been trying to protect? I spent the next few days attempting to contact anyone who might have known her. Friends, artists, acquaintances. They all seemed to know something but were too afraid to divulge it. Each attempt was met with silence, or worse, vague responses that only fueled my anxiety. Just when I thought I was getting nowhere, I received another message from the mysterious man, the one with the piercing eyes. This time, it was more menacing. "Stop digging. You have no idea what you're getting into." My heart raced as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Was he watching me? Who was he, and what was his connection to my mother? Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to meet with Daniel, a friend who had offered to help me navigate this treacherous terrain. We met in a small cafe, the atmosphere buzzing with life, but I felt like I was in a bubble, isolated by my worries. "Sarah, are you okay?" Daniel asked, concern etched across his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "I just need your help. I found something that connects my mother to a crime, but I can't do this alone." He leaned in closer, intrigued. "What do you have?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. "I don't know everything yet, but I found out she was a witness to something big. There's a man who's been watching me, leaving me messages. I think he's connected to whatever happened to her. Daniel's expression shifted from concern to determination. We can figure this out together. I promise I'll help you. I wanted to believe him, but a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Could I truly trust him? As I left the cafe, I checked my email, praying for a sign or a lead. Instead, I found another message. This one was anonymous, and it made my blood run cold. It included a photo of my mother, smiling and vibrant, with a note. "Stop investigating or you'll end up just like her." I felt the ground beneath me shift as panic set in. I was in deeper than I had anticipated, and the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to visit an old friend of my mother's who lived in a secluded neighborhood. I hoped she could provide some insight into the shadows of my mother's life. As I arrived at the quaint house, I felt a mix of hope and dread. The door swung open, revealing a warm smile. "Sarah, it's been so long. Come in, come in." We settled into her cozy living room, and I wasted no time. I need to know about my mother, the truth about what she was involved in. Her expression hardened slightly. "Your mother was a strong woman, but she got caught in something dangerous. Powerful people don't like being exposed." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my heart racing. "She was mixed up with a group of influential art collectors," she revealed, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were involved in more than just art. There was money laundering, and I think she was getting close to exposing them." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What happened to her?" "There were threats, Sarah. She was warned to stop, but she couldn't. She wanted to protect you." As I stood to leave, I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I glanced back to thank her, but the moment I stepped outside, a sense of dread washed over me. I turned to look behind me and caught a glimpse of the man with the piercing eyes, lurking in the shadows, watching me as I stepped into the street. My heart raced as I began to walk faster, my mind spinning with the implications of what I had just learned. This was bigger than I had thought, and I was no longer just a bystander. I was part of a dangerous game. The walls were closing in, and I knew I had to find a way to protect myself and uncover the truth about my mother's past before it was too late. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor of my small apartment, surrounded by the scattered remnants of my childhood. An old cardboard box lay open before me, filled with faded photographs, letters, and other mementos from a time when life felt simpler, albeit tinged with the bittersweet ache of loss. Each item I picked up seemed to whisper stories of my mother, a woman whose vibrant spirit had always been just out of reach since that dreadful day. As I sifted through the yellowing papers, a particular photograph caught my eye. My mother, radiant and full of life, stood beside one of her art pieces in a gallery, her smile infectious. I felt a rush of warmth and sorrow wash over me, a painful reminder of her passion and the secrets that had ultimately led to her demise. There was so much I didn't know about her life, especially the years she spent immersed in the art world of Chicago. The clock on the wall chimed, pulling me from my reverie. I needed coffee. I stood up, dusting off my jeans, and decided that a stroll through the neighborhood would clear my mind. Little did I know, that day would change everything. As I stepped outside, the crisp air hit my face, invigorating yet laced with an undercurrent of unease. I walked along the sidewalk, my thoughts still lingering on the photograph, when I noticed him. A man across the street, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes fixed on me. His gaze was intense, almost penetrating, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. I felt uncomfortable, yet something about him intrigued me. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the sensation of being watched, but I couldn't help stealing glances over my shoulder. He was still there, his expression unreadable, as if he were waiting for something. I turned away, focusing on the familiar storefronts lining the street, but the image of his eyes, dark and enigmatic, haunted me. I reached the cafe, ordered my usual, and tried to brush off the encounter. But as I waited for my drink, my mind raced with questions. Who was he? Why did he feel so familiar? When I returned home, the door creaked as I pushed it open, and I was immediately struck by something unusual. A single sheet of paper lay on my doormat, its stark whiteness contrasting against the dull brown of the floor. I bent down, my heart quickening as I picked it up. The words written in neat, deliberate handwriting sent chills through me. "You are closer than you think." What did that mean? Who had left it? My thoughts spiraled, the unease from earlier returning with a vengeance. I hurried inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to steady my racing heart. I had to investigate. There was no way I could ignore this. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the gallery where my mother had once exhibited her work. The building loomed before me, its glass facade reflecting the bustling life of the city. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open, the familiar scent of paint and varnish enveloping me like a ghost from the past. "Sarah, it's been a while." The owner, a stout man with a kind face, greeted me warmly, but I could see the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Hi, Mr. Thompson," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm here to ask about my mother." His expression shifted, and I felt the weight of the unspoken words between us. "I'm afraid the past can be a tricky subject, Sarah. It's been years. Please, I found this message," I said, pulling the paper from my pocket and handing it to him. "I need to understand what happened." He took the sheet, his brow furrowing as he read. "Your mother was a talented artist, but she was involved in things that, well, let's just say it wasn't all about art." "What do you mean?" I pressed, feeling a sense of urgency. There were rumors, whispers of a crime linked to some prominent figures in the art scene. It's complicated, and time has a way of changing things. He sighed, looking away as if he wished he hadn't opened this Pandora's box. "What about the night she died? Did she say anything to you? Did she mention anyone?" I leaned in, desperate for answers. "Not to me, but I overheard conversations. People were worried. Your mother was digging too deep into something." His voice trailed off, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Digging into what?" I was relentless, refusing to let this go. "Sarah, you need to be careful. Some things are better left buried," he warned, his tone suddenly grave. I left the gallery feeling more confused than ever. The fragments of my mother's past were beginning to weave a narrative that I wasn't prepared for. Back in my apartment, I rifled through old files and papers, my heart racing with each discovery. I came across a news article about her death, accompanied by a list of witnesses. My breath caught in my throat when I saw my mother's name highlighted in bold. She had been a witness, a vital one. I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't stop now. I needed to know what she had been involved in, who she had been afraid of. I had to uncover the truth. Days passed as I reached out to people who had known her. Each phone call was a step deeper into a dark abyss. Just when I thought I was making progress, I received another message from the man with the penetrating eyes. "You're treading dangerous waters. Stop while you can." I felt a mix of fear and defiance. Who did he think he was to threaten me? I sought comfort in Daniel, a friend I'd known since college, who had always been there for me. When I told him about the messages and my discoveries, his expression turned serious. "Sarah, you need to be careful. This isn't just about you anymore. There are people involved who won't hesitate to silence you." "I can't back down. Not now," I replied, my voice firm. "I have to find out what happened to my mom." Daniel looked at me, concern etched on his face. "I want to help you, but you need to promise that you'll be cautious." "Promise?" I said, though deep down, I could feel the tension building between us. As we spent time together, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was holding back. One evening, while we were sitting on my couch, I decided to confront him. "Daniel, is there something you're not telling me? You seem distant." He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't want you to get hurt. This situation is more complex than you realize." My heart raced. "What do you mean? Do you know something about my mother? About the case?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "My father was involved, in a way. I've tried to stay away from it all, but it's difficult when the past keeps resurfacing." I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. You knew all along? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to drag you into this mess. I thought I was protecting you, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Protecting me? Or yourself? I shot back, unable to contain my anger. Daniel stepped back, his expression pained. Sarah, please, I want to help you. Help? You've been keeping secrets, and I can't trust you anymore? I exclaimed, the weight of his revelation settling heavily in the air between us. I'm sorry, he said softly, the hurt in his voice almost breaking me. But I can't let you go down this path alone. Then let me do this alone, I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I couldn't let my feelings for him cloud my judgment. I needed to discover the truth about my mother, and if that meant pushing him away, then so be it. The tension hung in the air like a storm cloud, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had just lost someone who genuinely cared about me. But I had come too far to turn back now. The truth awaited, and I was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. As I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's life, a sense of nostalgia washed over me. The old cardboard box, worn and tattered, was filled with photographs, letters, and trinkets that seemed to whisper secrets from a time long past. I had spent countless hours sifting through this box, but today felt different. Today I was searching for answers. My fingers brushed against a faded photograph, and I pulled it out. It was an image of my mother, standing proudly in front of a large canvas in a gallery, her smile radiant and eyes sparkling with passion. I could almost hear her laughter echoing through the years. You were always the artist, Mom, I whispered to myself. The gallery had been a second home to her, a place where she poured her heart and soul into her work. But with that joy came shadows I had yet to understand. I snapped back to reality as the sound of my phone vibrating on the table broke the silence. I glanced at the screen and saw a text message from Daniel, the only person I had confided in about my investigation. Have you found anything? It read. I hesitated before responding, my thoughts racing. Could I trust him? I knew he wanted to help, but there was so much I hadn't shared with him yet. Not much yet, just going through old stuff, I replied. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the secrets surrounding my mother's past pressing down on me. I needed to get out to clear my head. Coffee always helped. As I locked the door behind me and stepped into the bustling streets, the air felt charged with anticipation. Chicago was alive with energy, but I felt a creeping sense of unease, as if someone was watching me. I dismissed the feeling, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. After all, I was on a mission to uncover the truth about my mother's death. The cafe on the corner was my usual stop. I stepped inside, the rich aroma of coffee enveloping me like a warm hug. I ordered my drink and settled into a quiet corner, trying to gather my thoughts. Just as I took a sip, I caught a glimpse of a figure outside the window. A man stood across the street, his piercing eyes fixed on me. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mix of discomfort and intrigue. There was something unsettling about the way he stared, as if he could see right through me. I quickly turned away, attempting to shake off the feeling. My mind was racing with the implications of my mother's past. The gallery, the messages, the mysterious man, it all felt intertwined. I needed to go back to the gallery to uncover the threads of her life that had been left behind. After finishing my coffee, I made my way to the gallery, my heart pounding with anticipation. As I entered, the familiar scent of paint and varnish filled my senses, and I was greeted by the owner, a portly man with a gentle smile. Sarah, it's good to see you again. Your mother would be proud of you, he said, his voice warm yet tinged with sadness. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I was hoping to ask you some questions about her, and about the time she spent here. He nodded slowly, his expression darkening. Ah, your mother. She was a brilliant artist, but her later years were filled with turmoil. I can't say much, but the art world can be a dangerous place. Dangerous how? I pressed, my curiosity piqued. He hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping. There were rumors of a network operating behind the scenes, involving artists and collectors. Your mother, she got too close to the truth. I believe she was trying to expose something. My heart raced. What kind of something? I can't say. It's best you don't dig too deep, Sarah. Some things are better left buried, he warned, his voice barely a whisper. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. But I have to know the truth. I have to understand what happened to her. Mr. Thompson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I wish I could help you, but the past is a treacherous place. If you pursue this, you need to be careful. There are people who will go to great lengths to protect their secrets. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Thompson, I said, feeling a mix of gratitude and frustration. I'll be careful. As I left the gallery, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement, and I quickened my pace. Once inside my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. I was getting closer to the truth, but the danger was becoming palpable. That night, I sat at my desk, poring over old documents and photographs. I was determined to find a connection, a thread that would lead me to the answers I sought. After hours of sifting through papers, I stumbled upon a name that sent chills down my spine. A witness who had testified during my mother's case. My mother had been involved in something much larger than I could have imagined. I spent the next few days attempting to reach out to anyone who might have known my mother back then. I called old friends, acquaintances, anyone who might have a clue about her past. But each time I tried, I was met with dead ends or vague responses, as if everyone were afraid to speak. Just when I thought I was making no progress, I received another message from the mysterious man. You're digging too deep, Sarah. Stop while you can. My hands trembled as I read the words. Who was this man? What did he want? And why did he seem to know so much about me? I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let fear control me. I needed to confront this head-on. I reached out to Daniel, hoping he'd be willing to help me navigate the treacherous waters I was about to dive into. Sarah, are you sure you want to do this? He asked, concern etched on his face when we met at a cafe. Yes, I can't back down now. I need to find out what happened to my mother, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Okay, I'll help you, but we need to be smart about this. There are people who won't want you to find out the truth, Daniel warned. I nodded, appreciating his support. I know. I've received messages. Someone's watching me. Daniel's expression shifted. We need to be careful then. Let's start by finding that witness. If your mother was involved in something major, maybe they can shed some light on it. With renewed determination, we set out to find the witness, piecing together my mother's life like a puzzle. Each step felt like a descent into a labyrinth of secrets, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the truth felt closer yet more elusive. The messages continued, cryptic warnings and threats that sent shivers down my spine. I was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than I had ever anticipated. It was during one of our late-night discussions that I stumbled across something unexpected. Daniel, I found an old diary of my mother's, I said, excitement bubbling within me. It could have answers. He looked intrigued, leaning forward. What does it say? I opened the diary, flipping through the pages filled with my mother's elegant handwriting. She wrote about the gallery, about the people she met. There's a mention of a club of artists, a secretive group she was involved with. Daniel's eyes widened. That could be it. That might be the connection we need. As I read further, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. There are names here, Daniel. Names of people I don't recognize, but one of them sounds familiar. It's like I've heard it before. What's the name? He asked, his curiosity piqued. I scanned the page, my heart racing as I spoke the name aloud. Butler is a last name. I think I've seen it in connection to some of the art auctions. Daniel's expression changed, and he grew pale as he read the name over my shoulder. Wait, that's... What? I pressed, anxiety creeping in. He hesitated, his eyes darting away. It's connected to my father's business. I didn't think it was related to your mother, but it might be. I felt a rush of betrayal and confusion. You knew? Why didn't you tell me? Sarah, I didn't know how to tell you. It's complicated. My father was involved in some questionable dealings, but I didn't think it had anything to do with your mother until now, he explained, frustration evident in his voice. I took a step back, my heart racing. You should have been straight with me from the beginning, Daniel. I was trying to protect you. He shot back, his voice rising. The art world isn't just paintings and creativity. It's filled with corruption, and I didn't want you to get hurt. I stared at him, my mind racing. But I'm already in danger. I need to know the truth, even if it hurts. As the tension hung in the air, I realized that this investigation was pulling us apart as the neon lights buzzed softly as I stepped into the dimly lit bar, the scent of aged whiskey and stale smoke wrapping around me like an unwanted cloak. I hesitated at the entrance, scanning the room for the man who had been haunting my thoughts since the moment I first laid eyes on him across the street. He was here somewhere, hidden among the shadows and the murmurs of clandestine conversations. My heart raced as I reminded myself of my purpose. I was here to confront him, to ask him what he knew about my mother and the terrible secrets she had left behind. The bar was nearly empty, save for a few patrons nursing their drinks and a couple of people huddled around a table in the back. I could see them in the corner, their voices low and conspiratorial. I took a deep breath, steeling myself as I moved further inside. The man, those piercing eyes, was seated at the bar, nursing a drink. He had that air of danger about him, the kind that made my instincts scream to run. But I couldn't. Not now. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew nearer, I noticed the way he leaned back against the bar, his attention split between his drink and the shadows of the room. I could feel the weight of his gaze without having to look directly at him. You, I said, forcing the words out with more bravado than I felt. I need to talk to you. He turned slowly, a smirk forming on his lips as his eyes locked onto mine. Well, if it isn't the curious daughter. What brings you here, Sarah? Cut the games, I snapped, trying to keep my voice steady. You know something about my mother. I want answers. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mixture of anger and fear surging through me. The last thing I wanted was to show him any weakness. Answers. He arched an eyebrow, clearly enjoying my discomfort. And what if I told you that some questions are better left unanswered? I clenched my fists, grounding myself in the moment. I'm not leaving until I get the truth. You're the last connection I have to her, and I won't let you walk away without telling me what you know. His expression shifted slightly, the playful glint in his eyes replaced by something more serious. All right, Sarah, he said, leaning in closer, but you have to understand that this isn't a game. The world you're stepping into is dangerous, and there are people who will do anything to protect their secrets. Then I'll be careful. I swallowed hard, my determination stealing my resolve. Just tell me what you know about the art gallery, about the night she was killed. He sighed, glancing around the bar as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping. Your mother was a part of something much bigger than you realize. The gallery, it wasn't just a place for art. It was a hub for a network of corruption and crime. Your mother was involved in things that could have gotten her killed. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean, involved? She was an artist, not a criminal. He shook his head slowly. That's where you're wrong. Your mother was smart, too smart for her own good. She caught wind of something happening behind the scenes. Something involving stolen art, money laundering, and people with power. She was planning to expose it. Expose it? I echoed, my mind racing. But why? What did she hope to achieve? Justice, maybe, or just to save her own skin. He took another sip of his drink, his gaze piercing into mine. But in this world, the truth can be a dangerous thing. You have to understand that. People will kill to keep their secrets safe. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I processed his words. And you? What's your role in all of this? He hesitated, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes before it was replaced by that familiar mask of indifference. Let's just say I've been around long enough to know how to navigate these waters. I'm not your enemy, Sarah. Then why have you been watching me? I challenged, my voice rising as frustration bubbled to the surface. Why leave those messages? You're just playing with me. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, he replied, his tone shifting to something more serious. I needed to know if you were ready for this. You're in over your head, and I didn't want to drag you down with me. Before I could respond, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A group of men had entered the bar, their demeanor exuding an air of authority that sent a shiver of dread down my spine. They scanned the room, and I felt the man beside me tense. We need to go, he said urgently, his voice low. Now. No, I need to know more. I started, but he grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward the exit. Trust me, he said, his grip firm but not painful. We don't have time for this. If they see you here with me, it could end badly for both of us. I hesitated, torn between the desire for answers and the instinct to flee. But as the men's voices grew louder, I felt the weight of danger pressing in on me, and I nodded. Okay, fine, let's go. He led me through the back exit of the bar, and we stepped into the cool night air. The street was quiet, the only sound being the distant hum of traffic. Where are we going? I asked, trying to catch my breath. To a safer place, he replied, glancing over his shoulder as if ensuring we weren't being followed. I have a friend nearby who can help. Help with what? I pressed, my curiosity piquing despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Help us get to the bottom of this. You need to see how deep this goes, Sarah. You need to understand what's at stake. He paused, his expression softening. And I need to protect you. You're too close to the truth, and it's starting to get dangerous. I can handle myself. I shot back, but the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. I've come this far. I can't just back down now. I'm not asking you to back down, he replied, stopping to face me. I'm asking you to be careful. You don't know the lengths these people will go to protect their interests. As we turned a corner, I struggled to gather my thoughts. You said my mother was trying to expose something, but what exactly? What was she involved in? He hesitated, his jaw tightening. She was investigating a ring of stolen art, but it went deeper than that. It was linked to powerful people in the city, people who have connections in the police, the government, everywhere. Your mother was getting too close to the truth, and they couldn't let that happen. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. And you? Are you part of this ring? Is that why you've been following me? No, he snapped, his eyes flashing with intensity. I'm not part of that world. I've been trying to dismantle it from the inside. My interest in you is purely to protect you. If they find out you're digging into your mother's past, they'll come after you. Why should I trust you? I shot back, my determination flaring again. You've kept things from me. You've known more than you've let on. Because I want to help you, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. I know this world, and I know how to navigate it, but I can't do it alone, and I can't let you get hurt. I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, but all I saw was a fierce resolve. Then let's do this together, I said finally, my voice steadier. I want to know the truth about my mother and what happened to her. He nodded, the tension easing slightly. All right, but you need to stay close to me, and you have to promise you won't act recklessly. The moment you step out of line, you put yourself in danger. I promise, I said, feeling the gravity of the situation settle between us. But I won't back down. I need to know what really happened. As we walked through the darkened streets, my mind raced with the implications of everything I had learned. The man beside me had been my enemy and my ally, a puzzle I couldn't quite fit together. But one thing was clear. I was in the middle of something far more complex than I had ever imagined, and the stakes were higher than I had dared to believe. With every step, I felt the weight of my mother's legacy pressing down on me, urging me to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And as we moved deeper into the night, I knew there was no turning back. As I stepped into the dimly lit living room of my mother's friend, a sense of unease washed over me. The air was thick with memories, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets I yearned to uncover. My heart raced as I remembered the chilling message left at my door and the piercing gaze of the mysterious man who had been following me. I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand, to learn the truth about my mother and the shadows that loomed over her past. "Sarah," a soft voice broke the silence, pulling me from my reverie. It was Marianne, my mother's old friend, her face lined with the wisdom of years and the weight of untold stories. Even in her late 60s, she had an undeniable spark in her eyes. "Marianne," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Of course, dear. I know how difficult this must be for you." She gestured for me to sit down on the worn-out couch, its fabric faded but still comfortable. "Your mother meant a lot to me. She was a remarkable woman." As I settled in, I couldn't help but feel a surge of nostalgia. I remembered visiting Marianne as a child, the laughter we shared, the stories my mother told me about their adventures in art and life. But now, those memories felt tainted by the dark cloud of my mother's unsolved murder. "Have you found out anything more?" Marianne asked, her voice low and cautious. I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "I've been digging into her past. I found some documents that suggest she was involved in something dangerous." Marianne's expression shifted. Worry etched into her features. "Your mother was always drawn to the thrill of the unknown. She had this passion for art that sometimes led her into precarious situations. Do you know anything about the gallery she used to exhibit in? I think it holds some clues." I pressed, my urgency growing. "The gallery," she murmured, her gaze drifting to a framed painting on the wall. "It was a hub for many artists, but it also attracted some unsavory characters. Your mother often mentioned a club of sorts, a gathering of influential people in the art world. She was fascinated by it, but I always worried about its darker side. Do you think she knew too much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marianne took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She was getting close to the truth, Sarah. I could see it in her eyes. She had this fire when she talked about the people who frequented that gallery. But I warned her to be careful. There were whispers about corruption and illegal dealings. I need to know more," I insisted, feeling the weight of my mother's legacy pressing down on me. "Do you have any of her letters or journals?" "Letters?" Marianne seemed to ponder for a moment. "Yes, I believe I have some of her old things in the attic. I never threw them away, hoping one day she'd come back for them." "Can we look?" I asked, a mix of hope and desperation in my tone. "Of course," she replied, rising from her chair. "Follow me." We made our way to the attic, the wooden stairs creaking beneath our weight. The attic was a treasure trove of memories. Old furniture, dusty boxes, and a faint smell of mothballs. Marianne rummaged through a stack of boxes, her movements careful and deliberate. "Here it is," she said, lifting a box labeled Clara's Things, my mother's name. She placed it on the floor and opened it, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and scraps of paper. As we sifted through the contents, I felt a rush of emotions. Each item was a piece of my mother's life, a glimpse into the woman I had lost. I picked up a faded photograph of her at an art show, her smile radiant, and beside her stood a group of artists I didn't recognize. "Who are they?" I asked, pointing to the photo. "I can't say for sure," Marianne replied, squinting at the image. "But I know some of them were quite influential in the art scene. Your mother had a knack for making connections. Sometimes those connections were not what they seemed." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words. There must be something in her letters that can help me. After searching through the papers, I finally found an envelope that seemed more worn than the others. It was addressed to me, though it had never been sent. My hands trembled as I carefully opened it, revealing my mother's elegant handwriting. "Dear Sarah," I read aloud, my voice thick with emotion. "If you are reading this, It means something has happened to me. I've been investigating the art world, trying to uncover a network of corruption. I fear that I may be in over my head. Please, if anything happens, remember that I love you. Trust no one." Marian gasped softly, her eyes wide with shock. She knew something was wrong. Why didn't she tell me? I muttered, frustration boiling inside me. Why didn't she come to me for help? Sometimes, we think we are protecting our loved ones by keeping them in the dark, Marian said gently. But your mother was strong-willed. She believed she could handle it alone. I continued reading, each sentence pulling me deeper into my mother's world. The letter detailed her encounters with various artists and collectors, mentioning a secretive club that met after hours to discuss rare art pieces and potentially illegal transactions. "Marianne, do you know anything about this club?" I asked, my heart racing. "Only rumors," she replied, her voice low. "Some said it was a front for money laundering. Others believed it was a breeding ground for illegal art sales. Your mother was drawn to it, but I always feared it would lead her into danger." I felt a chill run down my spine. What if she was getting too close to exposing them? Marian nodded solemnly. "It's possible. There are people who will do anything to protect their secrets." The weight of that statement hung in the air as I continued to read through the letters. One caught my attention. It was addressed to a Mr. Thompson, a name I hadn't encountered before. "Who is this Mr. Thompson?" I asked, looking up at Marianne. "I've heard that name before," she said slowly. "He was rumored to be a powerful figure in the art world, someone who could make or break careers. Your mother mentioned him once. She thought he was involved in something sinister." My mind raced with possibilities. "Do you think he could be behind her death?" "It's hard to say," Marian replied, her voice tinged with worry. "But if your mother was getting too close to exposing him or his associates, he wouldn't hesitate to silence her." I swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of the situation pressing down on me. I have to find out more about him. I need to know who my mother was dealing with. As I gathered the letters and photographs, I felt a surge of determination. It was time to confront the past and find justice for my mother. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and I glanced towards the attic window, half expecting to see the shadow of the man who had been stalking me. "Sarah, are you okay?" Marianne's voice broke through my thoughts. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to shake off the unease. "I just need to process all of this." "Take your time," she said softly. "I'll be right here if you need to talk or if you want to go over anything else." "Thank you, Marianne," I said, grateful for her support. "I just wish I could find a way to get justice for her." "I believe you will," she replied, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Just be careful. The art world is more dangerous than it seems." With that, I turned my attention back to my mother's letters, the weight of my discovery settling heavily in my heart. I needed to find Mr. Thompson and uncover the truth behind the network of corruption that had taken my mother from me. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a web of deceit and danger that I might not be able to escape. The air felt heavy as I stepped into the dimly lit office of my mother's attorney. The scent of aged paper and leather mingled with a hint of something metallic, making my stomach churn. I had been nervous about this meeting. I had hoped that it would shed some light on the shadows that had enveloped my mother's past. But now, an inexplicable dread settled in my chest. "Sarah, it's good to see you," Mr. Jenkins said as he gestured for me to take a seat. His voice was warm, but I could see the worry etched on his face. "I didn't expect you to come here alone. I didn't want to involve anyone else just yet," I replied, forcing a smile that I didn't feel. "I just need to know what happened. You were her lawyer. You must know something. Your mother was a remarkable woman," he began, his eyes drifting to a framed photo of my mother on his desk. "She was passionate and fiercely dedicated to her art, but she also found herself in a very precarious situation." "Precarious," I echoed, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" Mr. Jenkins leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She was about to expose something significant, something dangerous. I don't think she realized the extent of the threat she was facing. Threat? I pressed, my pulse quickening. What was she going to expose? Before he could respond, the sudden sound of the door being flung open caught us both off guard. A group of men, dressed in dark suits with an air of menace surrounding them, stormed into the office. My heart dropped as I recognized one of them, the man who had been watching me outside the gallery. He had the same piercing eyes, filled with a mix of anger and determination. "Mr. Jenkins, we have business to discuss," the man said, his voice cold and commanding. I could feel the panic rising within me. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaky. "Stay back, Sarah," Mr. Jenkins warned, standing protectively in front of me. "This doesn't concern you." "But it does concern me," I protested, my instincts kicking in. "These men are dangerous." The men ignored me and closed in on Mr. Jenkins. "You've been talking too much," the man said, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. "It's time to stop." I glanced around the room, looking for an escape. My mind raced as I tried to process the chaotic scene. I had thought that Mr. Jenkins would provide me with answers, but now it felt like I had walked straight into a trap. Suddenly, one of the men lunged forward and grabbed Mr. Jenkins by the collar, yanking him toward the door. "No!" I screamed, adrenaline surging through me. "Let him go!" In that moment, I realized I had to act. I darted toward the desk, my eyes scanning for anything I could use. My fingers brushed against a leather briefcase, and I instinctively snatched it up. "Stop her!" the man shouted. But I was already moving, my heart pounding in my ears. I raced for the door, but before I could reach it, another man blocked my path, his expression a mask of indifference. "Get out of my way!" I shouted, trying to push past him. "Sarah, run!" Mr. Jenkins yelled, his voice strained. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned on my heels and bolted towards the back exit, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the men shouting behind me, their footsteps pounding on the floor as they chased me. I burst through the door and into a narrow alley, the cool air hitting my face like a splash of ice water. I didn't stop to catch my breath. I sprinted down the alley, my mind racing with thoughts of what just happened. I had to get away, but where could I go? I glanced back and saw the men emerging from the building, their faces set in determination. "Sarah," one of them shouted, his voice echoing in the alley. "You can't run forever." I pushed myself harder, my legs burning as I dodged around trash cans and debris. Just as I thought I had a moment to catch my breath, I spotted a figure at the end of the alley, an elderly man rummaging through a pile of cardboard boxes. He looked up, startled, as I approached. "Help me," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. His eyes widened, and without a word, he gestured for me to hide behind the boxes. I ducked down, my heart racing as I pressed my back against the cold metal. I could hear the men's footsteps growing closer, their voices loud and accusatory. "She went this way." I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the narrow space, and I could feel the tension in the air as they searched. "Where the hell is she?" one of them growled. "It doesn't matter. She's just a girl. We need to find Jenkins," another replied. My heart sank. They were here for Mr. Jenkins, and I had unwittingly stumbled into a deadly game of cat and mouse. After what felt like an eternity, their voices faded as they moved further down the alley. I exhaled slowly, relief flooding over me. But that relief was short-lived. My mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. I needed to find out what Mr. Jenkins had meant about my mother's involvement in something dangerous. I cautiously emerged from my hiding spot, glancing around to ensure it was clear. The alley was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Clutching the briefcase tightly, I made my way to the street, where I ducked into a nearby cafe, hoping to blend in with the crowd. Inside, I sank into a corner booth, my heart still racing. I glanced around, scanning the room for any signs of danger, but it seemed like a typical cafe. The smell of coffee filled the air, a soothing contrast to the panic that still coursed through my veins. I took a moment to collect myself, my fingers trembling as I unzipped the briefcase. Inside, I found a stack of papers, neatly organized but filled with jargon that made my head spin. I pulled out the top document and began to read. Confidential investigation into the Chicago art trafficking ring. It began. My breath hitched as I realized the gravity of what I was holding. This wasn't just about my mother. It was about a network of corruption that reached deep into the city's elite. I flipped through the pages, my eyes widening with each line. There were names, powerful names I recognized from the society pages, and details about illicit dealings, threats, and cover-ups. My mother's name appeared again and again, always linked to the same shadowy dealings. Unbelievable. I whispered to myself, my hands shaking. It was all right here. Evidence of the crime that had taken my mother's life. I had to get this information to the right people, but who could I trust? Suddenly, I heard the bell above the cafe door ring. I looked up, my heart racing again. A figure stepped inside, scanning the room. It was Daniel. He had a determined look on his face, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. "Sarah," he called out, rushing toward me. "I was looking for you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, my voice shaky. "But you need to see this." I pushed the briefcase across the table toward him. His eyes widened as he opened it, quickly scanning the documents. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his tone shifting from concern to urgency. "Mr. Jenkins," I said, my heart racing as I recalled the chaos. He was about to tell me everything when those men showed up. They took him. Daniel looked up sharply, his expression darkening. "We need to get out of here. If they find you with this..." "Wait," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I'm not leaving until we figure out what to do with this information. My mother was involved in something much bigger than I ever realized. And, Sarah," Daniel said, his voice low and urgent, "this is dangerous. We need to prioritize your safety." "I can't just walk away," I insisted. "This is about her, about the truth." He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I understand, but we can't expose ourselves any further. We need a plan." Before I could respond, the cafe door swung open again, and in walked two of the men from earlier. My heart dropped as they scanned the room, their eyes locking onto Daniel and me. "Now!" Daniel hissed, grabbing my wrist and pulling me up from the booth. I barely had time to react as he led me toward the back exit. We pushed through the door just as the men began to move in our direction. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind us as we dashed into the alley, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. "Where do we go?" I gasped, my lungs burning as we ran. Daniel glanced around, his expression focused. "We need to find a safe place, somewhere we can lay low. Just keep running." We raced through the winding back streets, the sounds of the city fading behind us. My mind was a whirlwind of chaos. Mr. Jenkins, the documents, the truth about my mother. I stood in the dimly lit apartment, my heart racing as I faced Daniel. The air between us was thick with tension, each second stretching into an eternity. I couldn't shake the dread that had settled in my stomach ever since I discovered that folder, the one filled with damning evidence that linked him to this web of deceit and betrayal. "Sarah, let me explain," Daniel said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Explain what?" I shot back, my hands trembling at my sides. "You were lying to me this whole time. You knew more than you let on. You're mixed up in this, Daniel. You're part of the problem. Listen to me." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I never wanted you to get hurt. I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark." "Protect me?" I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the silence of the room. "How is lying to me protecting me? You deceived me, Daniel. You let me think I could trust you. Because I do care about you, Sarah," he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. "I got involved in this to take them down. I'm not your enemy. I'm trying to stop the very people who hurt your mother." His words hung in the air, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to grapple with. What do you mean? How can I believe anything you say? You were so close to me, and yet you were hiding this massive secret. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I had come to associate with his frustration. I had to gain their trust. I had to get close to them to gather evidence. When I met you, I thought you were just you. I didn't expect to fall for you, Sarah, but I did. My breath hitched as I processed his confession. So all of this was a game to you? I was just a pawn in your little operation. No! He stepped back, his expression shifting from desperation to determination. You're not a pawn. You're the reason I'm doing this. I couldn't let you get hurt like your mother. I thought if I played my part well enough, I could dismantle the whole operation from the inside. Then why didn't you come clean? Why not tell me from the start? I felt a swirl of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion, fighting for dominance. Because I didn't want to put you in danger, he replied, his voice softer now, almost pleading. I thought if I could keep you safe, I could end this without dragging you into it. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of emotions clouding my judgment. And what about the man I've been seeing? The one who left me those messages? How do I know he's not part of your operation too? Sarah, he's not what you think, Daniel insisted, his eyes locking onto mine. He's someone who's been trying to bring this network down for years. He was close to your mother. She trusted him. Trusted him? My mother was killed. How can I trust anyone connected to her death? I felt a fresh wave of anger rise within me. And what does this mean for you? Are you really one of the good guys? Or are you just another player in this twisted game? I'm trying to do what's right, he said with conviction. But I need your help. We can't do this alone. If we expose them together, we can finally get justice for your mother and stop this from happening to anyone else. I stared at him, weighing his words. Could I really trust him? The evidence had painted him as an accomplice. Yet something in his eyes told me he was sincere. My heart ached at the thought of losing him, but the stakes had never been higher. I don't know, Daniel. I feel like I'm caught in the middle of a storm. I don't even know who to trust anymore. I admitted, my voice trembling. Trust yourself, he replied softly. You're stronger than you think. You've already come this far. We can figure this out together. Just please, don't shut me out. I took a deep breath, considering his words. Perhaps he was telling me the truth, but I needed to know for sure. Okay, let's say I believe you for a moment. What's the plan? How do we take down this organization? We need to gather more evidence, solid evidence that connects them to your mother's death and their operation, he said, his tone shifting to one of focus. We can use the information from that folder. There are names, dates, and locations that could lead us to the heart of this network. I nodded slowly. The folder contained enough information to make my head spin. And the man I saw, the one who left me the messages. He's involved in this, but not in the way you think, Daniel said. He's been working independently, trying to expose the same people we are. He might be our best chance at finding out more. I thought for a moment. So you want me to reach out to him? After everything? Yes, Daniel urged. If we can get him on our side, we might be able to piece together what happened to your mother and take these people down once and for all. I hesitated but felt a flicker of determination ignite within me. Okay, I'll do it, but if I sense anything off, I'm out. I won't put myself in danger again. Fair enough, he replied, relief flooding his features. We'll do this together. Just trust me a little longer. Trust? I muttered, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. It's going to take time before I can fully trust you again. Understood, he said, nodding. But for now, let's focus on gathering evidence and getting to the bottom of this. As we began to outline our next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my chest. The man who had been watching me, the messages left on my door, they were all reminders that we were not alone in this fight. There were dark forces at play, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence us if they felt threatened. Do you think he'll even talk to me? I asked, my voice small. What if he sees me as a threat? He might, but if you approach him as someone looking for answers, He could be more willing to listen, Daniel suggested. Just remember to be cautious. These people are dangerous. I nodded, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my shoulders. I'll do my best to tread carefully. I just want to know the truth. I need to know what really happened. Then let's get to work, Daniel said, his resolve evident. We'll take it one step at a time. We spent the next few hours gathering our thoughts and planning our approach. The more we talked, the more I felt the remnants of my anger towards him slowly dissipate. I still had doubts, but there was something undeniably comforting about having him by my side. As night fell, I looked out the window, the city lights twinkling like stars against the dark sky. I felt a mix of fear and determination, knowing we were about to dive into the heart of a dangerous conspiracy. But more pressing was the realization that I was no longer alone in this fight. Daniel was with me, and together we might just stand a chance against the shadows that loomed over our lives. "Are you ready?" he asked, breaking me out of my thoughts. I took a deep breath, readying myself for the challenges ahead. Ready as I'll ever be. Let's find the truth. With our resolve set, we stepped into the unknown, ready to confront the ghosts of the past and the villains of the present. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Together, we might just uncover the secrets that had been buried for too long.